All right, so lesson 5.1 and 5.2 for grade 9s is the difference between direct and partial variation. Pretty simple difference. So direct variation is something that varies directly. For instance, y is a multiple of x. So if I want to buy one video game at $80, it's 1 times 80. If I want to buy 2 video games, it's 2 times 80. 3 is 3 times 80. It directly varies with the cost of video games. Whereas partial variation, let's say you had to pay to get into the video game store, if anyone ever goes to video game stores anymore. Yeah, you got to pay per video game, but you also have to pay a fee to get in. Let's say it's $5. So one video game would be 1 times 80 plus 5, 85 bucks. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples of direct and partial variation. A good example for direct variation is your rate of pay. So let's say you get paid $14 per hour, right? And partial variation could be like a taxi, or I guess we can say Uber. Maybe it costs 30 cents a kilometer, but you also have to pay $5 to enter the Uber. Okay, there's always a fixed fee. So if you're going around the block, it's not going to cost you 50 cents, right? They got to make that $5. Okay, so if we want to change this into a table of values, we can just make a table pretty simply. We can say X and Y, 0 hours, 1 hour, 2 hours, and we can fill this in. If I work 0 hours, I make $0. If I work 1 hour, I make 14. If I work 2 hours, I make 28, etc., etc. Okay, this is direct variation. Let's take a look at Uber though. If I take an Uber and I want to go, and I'm going to change these kilometers just because 1 kilometer would be pretty small. So if I use it for 0 kilometers, I still have to pay $5. It's not $0. So that's a really important factor in partial variation. If I go 10 kilometers, I have to multiply 30 cents times 10, which is $3. So this is $8. Multiply this by 20, I get 6. This is $11. Okay, so this is direct variation. This is partial variation. The most important things to consider here is where these things equal 0. So for instance, when X is 0, this is where I can recognize if something is direct or partial variation. If it goes through 0, 0, it's direct variation. If it doesn't go through 0, 0, it's partial. Okay, now let's take a look at how the graphs are going to look. I know you guys don't know how to graph yet, but we'll get there. This graph, if you're looking at a graph or a graph that you don't know how or what it means, direct variation is always going to come from the origin. So this is the origin, this is 0, this is your Y, this is your X. So this point right here makes it direct variation. It goes through the origin 100% of the time, it's direct variation. Whereas partial variation is just not that. So it can come from anywhere. If this is $5 to get into the cab, then it starts from here and goes up from here, where this is the origin, this is your X, and this is your Y. Okay, so you can notice that this does not start at the origin, and this is why it's partial variation. So very, very easy to determine the difference. We can look at it at a table. If it's 0, 0, direct. If it's not 0, 0, partial. We could look at it at a graph, which is pretty straightforward. If it goes through the origin, it's direct. If it goes through anywhere but the origin, it's partial. Okay, the hardest thing to kind of figure out is word problems. So word problems, you have to kind of think about, does it have a fixed cost? Does it have an initial value? And only then will you be able to determine whether it's partial variation or not. So if you're just getting paid, $14 an hour, or you're paying $10 for a pizza, this is all direct variation, because the more pizzas you buy, the cost is going to vary directly with the number of pizzas you buy. Whereas partial variation, there has to be some sort of value, initial value, that is different than 0. Okay, so it's really important to consider this value and to figure out what this value is first, whether it exists or not, right? Because this is really just plus 0, plus 0. Okay, whereas this B is anything greater than 0. Okay, that's the difference between direct and partial variation.